Yo, what is up guys, it's Pedro here, and in today's video I'll be giving you guys a national media mock draft roundup. So every analyst, Mel Kiper, Jordan Reed, some Commanders reporters, everything you need to know about the Commanders and mock drafts they're going around, what they're hearing, and who they have the Washington Commanders picking on Thursday next week. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well. Please show love on this video. Comment who you want the Washington Commanders to draft in this draft. Let's get right into the video. Sorry if you hear some background noise. I don't know if it's the AC or whatever, but it's going crazy right now. But let's get right into it. So I know I said that like 3 times. We're 6 days away from the NFL draft. It's crazy, but it is here. And this is like one of the not mock drafts, the drafts where you have no idea where the Commanders are going because they're picking at 29, which hasn't happened in a minute. And then also because this draft isn't as strong and there's, varying opinions on so many players that some guys that, might drop where the Commanders didn't think they would. And you don't know where a certain player that, maybe you think goes top 15, maybe he doesn't go till 30, 31. Like I say, for example, James Pierce, edge rusher from Tennessee. I've seen him, slip out of the first round. And, some people might think he's a top 15, top 18 guy. So it's just a bunch of things to think about and you'll see in these mock drafts, this is varying results. So let's get right into it. So Mel Kiper, godfather of, mock drafts and everything, maybe you don't always agree with his opinions, but you got to respect him. He has the Commanders taking Shamar Stewart, defensive end from Texas A&M. For me, not a big Shamar Stewart fan. I would not be really happy with the pick, but, he does have a lot of potential, but 1.5 sacks last year, it's just, I don't know, man. I don't think it's the best, pick at 29. It is what it is, though. He comes off the board here 12 spots later. So he was thinking about him for Cincinnati at 17, but picked him at 29. So he might actually go earlier, and that's fine. I just am a big production guy in terms of what I'm looking for in a player. In terms of, if I want the Commanders to draft him, obviously I'm not the one picking, but just in terms of what I like is production. You have to have traits as well, and Shamar Stewart has that. It's one of the most athletic defensive ends in NFL history coming out of the draft. Look at RAS score. He's the number 1 guy out of like thousands of guys, but the production's not there. So for me, I don't know. I just don't really see it, and I would not really draft him at 29. And then you got Darian Porter, cornerback, Iowa State, who he had picking in the Commanders picking in the second round. All right, Todd McShay, one of the other big names. He's not working at ESPN anymore. I guess he's working at the Ringer, but he has the Washington Commanders taking Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. So he's not a super athletic guy, but had a really good season in 2023, still played decent in 2024, really good fundamentals type of guy. The tape is good, and the drills at the combine, he was doing really well. I like Malachi Starks. I wouldn't mind it here. I do think the Commanders do need a safety, so taking Malachi Starks wouldn't be a bad option in my opinion for the Commanders. And you see in this mock draft, because you can see everyone, some of the players that got taken before the Commanders, James Pierce right before with the Detroit Lions. You see, Barron, the cornerback from Texas, he got taken a few spots ahead. Jalen Milroe there, Mikael Williams. I think he is going to be drafted higher than that. You got Donovan Azaraku, who I think would be great for the Commanders. Jihad Campbell. You see a bunch of names. Mike Green, all the way up there to 17. That's his range is probably like, 14 to the Commanders. I don't see him going past the Commanders. But let's continue to go through this. So this is Chris Collingsworth, but I just thought, we'll throw him out there. Mike Green, that's where he has the Commanders, or who he has the Commanders taking. So I love Mike Green. There are some character concerns with him and James Pierce, where that's why they might fall. At least reports. I don't know anything. I haven't, haven't seen anything about that, but But I think, those two guys at 29 would be good picks, especially Mike Green. I have Mike Green over James Pierce, but just, another option there. You got Dane Brugler, one of the top mock draft guys for The Athletic, has the Washington Commanders taking Emeka Egbuka. So that's a guy I really like. He had a really good season 2023, still had a good season in 2024, has had a lot of good production at Ohio State. Ohio State has produced a lot of NFL receivers, and it's just a guy that I think will come in and play well right away, and it gives you a younger receiver in the wide receiver room that you really don't have. You got Terry, you got Debo, they're a little bit older. They're not old, but they're a little bit older, and then you got Luke McCaffrey, who has, some potential, but he's super, I don't know, he didn't show a lot last year, but, so Emeka Egbuka, that's a guy that I wouldn't mind, and I'm not, super low on Luke McCaffrey, but I think you need another younger guy in there. Not necessarily saying take one in the first round, but taking one in the first round isn't the worst idea. Some of the other notable names in this mock draft, they got Genti at 5, which is interesting. You got Shamar Stewart going all the way up at 11, so teams like him. At least that's what Dane Brugler thinks. Mike Green, Mikael Williams 15, 16. And then, the guys that were, Malachi Starks was still available, and Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College, who I really like. He's more of a higher floor, lower ceiling maybe type of guy, but I do like him. And, those were the guys that are available for the Commanders when they were picking. Jacob Infante, another, draft analyst. He has, had the Commanders taking Malachi Starks, so another guy linking Malachi Starks to the Commanders. Like I said, wouldn't mind this pick. Is it the, my number one option? No, but I do think the Commanders need to prioritize adding defense in this year's draft, and, Malachi Starks would definitely help out the, secondary. You would have Quan Martin, Malachi Starks, and then what's his name? I don't know why I forgot the safety's name that we signed from the Saints. Commanders signed, I think it's Will Harris, maybe Saints player. Let's see, Will Harris. Yeah, Will Harris. All right. Got it, of course, after I mentioned that I didn't know it. But whatever, that'll be the man rotation there. Warren Sharp, another, popular guy in terms of, NFL analysis, 400K followers on Twitter. I almost said X. He had the Commanders taking Omarion Hampton, running back UNC. Do not think he will be there. You could see the Bears taking him. You could see other teams taking him throughout the draft. You got the Cowboys could take him. He has actually the Broncos taking Travion Henderson, which is interesting, over Omarion Hampton. So just something there to think about as well. Ben Standig, so he actually has a bunch of different mock draft scenarios. So, just some, the best case scenarios, and then just, a bunch of different scenarios. So the one, obviously, that's a great one. Ezaraku, Benjamin Morrison, cornerback, Notre Dame, Jalen Lane, Virginia Tech, receiver, one of my favorite options. You see some of the other guys, well, they don't take a running back, which would be a little bit of a dagger, but it is what it is, not the end of the world. Stick and pick, Josh Connerly, offensive tackle. Oregon, you got Alfred Collins, Denzel Burke, Taj Brooks, obviously has connections with the Commanders. Then the next one, trade down. So you would get Nick Scorton, defensive end, Texas A&M, Azrae Thomas, cornerback, Florida State, Devin Neal. So that would be a good, draft as well. And then you got, the 2026. So guys that are a little bit more raw, so they trade back, I guess. Siobhan Ravel, cornerback, Femi Oladapo, who does have connections to the Commanders, Josiah Stewart. You see some of the other names as well. And the next one, Max Jaden Daniels. So just try to get as many guys as possible that will help out Jaden Daniels. Only one defensive player. I'm not a fan of that one. I do like the first round pick, but you got to help, the defense. You can help out Jaden Daniels as much as you want, but if you have a number one offense with 30th ranked defense or 32nd ranked defense, then it's not going to work. And then 6 was just random. I don't know. He had them trading up to 20 to take the safety Nick Amenawari from South Carolina, athletic freak, and then taking Bashal Tutin, who is a stud from Virginia Tech, and then some other guys. So I would say I like number 1 here, and then number 1's the only one I really like here. Number 3 is also good, I would say. You take a defensive end, you trade back, you still get, you get a cornerback too, and you get a receiver. Don't really know much about Torrey Holden, watched him play a few times. And then Devin Neal would be good as well. So I do like this, actually. The more I look at it, I like this one. And then I don't really like 6 because I don't think you need to trade up that much for a safety. You're giving up a lot of assets, and then it's just, not the move in my opinion. Number 4 would be okay. You're just throwing a lot of darts out there. You're throwing a lot of darts out there for defensive players, the first 3 guys. But those are kind of the main mock drafts. Let's see. We'll go to Matt Miller here. They just did a exercise pick that fills a big need and then the best value. So they did a little mock draft there. So Henderson was one option, fills a need, and then also they did one where the best value, and that's Shamar Stewart. For me, like I said, Shamar Stewart's not someone I want. And I don't really this was interesting because the Commanders are at 29, and he says they rank Stewart at 28. So there's no way that the board went exactly how his players were ranked, and there was no one available that was better than Shamar Stewart. I mean, maybe. I just doubt it. Maybe saying best value at position of need. I don't know. But Shamar Stewart, like I said, not a big fan if the Commanders take him. But, of course, I'll trust the process. I mean, Adam Peters knows a lot more than me, a lot more than all y'all. And than anyone on Twitter, whatever. He's, we got to trust him. So we'll trust him and, until he gives us a reason not to. And if it doesn't work out, it is what it is. But, Shamar Stewart has a lot of athletic traits. So I wouldn't, it wouldn't be an awful pick in my opinion. It's just I'd rather go a bunch of different directions before I would go Shamar Stewart, a guy that has, just had 1.5 sacks last year. It's just, and he was playing, next to a really good edge rusher, Nick Scorton, and a good defensive tackle. So when you have that and other guys are getting double teamed and you're still only getting 1.5 sacks, for me, that's very concerning. I'm sorry. But he has the traits. If you, trust Darryl Tapp, your other coaches, that you can develop him, it is what it is. Joe Witt, maybe you can get the best out of him. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys are new, and peace.